Well, this is Eric Salahub, and I'm back for a short screencast. I'm experimenting with integrating a little video here, and I want to talk briefly about the Advice to Julie journal assignment. I posted the grades, and by and large, people did really well, but almost no one gave a complete, thorough analysis, and in fact, I didn't expect it, with only a 400 words, 250 to 400 words. So I thought I'd give you an overview of the kinds of things you could have said if you would have totally, gone both barrels with it. So, the assignment was to offer advice to Julie about this potential secret affair with a stranger at a conference, only from the standpoint of Kantian deontology, and I suggested that you use both formulations of the categorical imperative. The word only here is important because I didn't want you to include any kind of advice that is something Kant wouldn't say, and I really was looking for a focus on Kantian deontology. So I guess we can review the categorical imperative, both formulations. The first formulation, never act according to a general rule which cannot be made into a universal law. We could also state it in the positive, always act according to general rules that can be made into universal laws. Again, I like it this way, as I talked about in the text. I think it makes more sense in the negative to tell us what we can't do. And we know the second formulation of the categorical imperative says it's always wrong to treat a person only as a means to an end. And this would include you and everybody else. And the word only here is also important. We do use each other as means to an end frequently, and that's okay as long as the preliminary thing we're thinking about is that every person is an end in him or herself. And so if we're respecting someone as an end in him or herself, then we can enter into these kind of means-ends relationships, but that's always a secondary thing, and on top of this fundamental respect that we have. So the first thing we might ask is, can we make having marital affairs a universal law? And almost everybody agreed that we can't, because if we tried to universalize cheating, then it wouldn't be cheating, right? Our traditional idea of marriage is kind of founded on this explicit agreement of fidelity. Unless we're talking about some kind of alternative marriage, I want to put quotes around it, an open marriage or something where two people agree to get married, but we can have sex with whoever we want to. And if that was the case in Julie's marriage, then she wouldn't be calling a helpline because she wouldn't have to lie about something that her husband and her had already agreed was okay. Since she thinks it's cheating and she's calling a helpline, she must have one of these traditional marriages. And you can imagine if every marriage allowed cheating or expected everyone to cheat, then either we'd never get married in the first place, or marriage would mean something completely different than what it means in the traditional sense. So, we simply can't universalize cheating in marriage without completely undermining or nullifying the entire concept of marriage. So, it's really important to remember here for this first formulation of the categorical imperative. When we talk about not being able to universalize a maxim, we're not talking about we can't universalize it because bad things would happen. What we're saying is it is logically impossible to turn it into a universal law. It's self-nullifying, and that's what happens here with the idea of cheating in marriage. And we can also talk about lying. A lot of people said, well, she's going to lie to her husband, and so that's wrong according to the first formulation, as we talked about explicitly in the discussions. If everybody lied all the time, then there would be no truth. Deceptions wouldn't work, so no one would bother to lie. We wouldn't trust each other. And again, with the expectation of loyalty and fidelity in marriage, even if Julie doesn't lie, even if she just comes home and doesn't say anything, we hashed this out on the board. When does lying by omission really become a lie? And I guess I would argue that in this case it does. I don't think we expect to have to ask our, husband or wife every time they come home whether they had sex with someone else, just so we know they're not lying to us. When you have this foundation of a relationship that's grounded in trust and fidelity, the expectation is that that's what's going to happen. And I think if you don't live up to that, you're really lying, even if you don't come right out and if you don't come right out and lie. So I think lying is And we talked about this. Lying can't be turned into a universal law either. And there were several other ways people went with that. They talked about promise keeping, loyalty, and those sorts of things, and framed them in ways that they couldn't be turned into a universal law. And so anything like that definitely made sense. We could also consider not using someone only as a means to an end, and we could ask ourselves, is anybody potentially being used only as a means to an end? And the first person most people mentioned was Julie's husband. In one sense, she seems pretty clearly to be using her husband as a means to an end. I mean, some people said, what does she just want her husband for friendship or for money or for stability or for social acceptance? She's using him for those kinds of things, but certainly not treating him as an end in himself. Some people actually went so far as to talk about this idea that Julie was really harming her husband, again, not in the sense of consequences, but disrespecting him by removing his ability to make free choices. Sorry, I've got two computers going here and one's making noise. I think Kant would have to say that if you respect somebody, you have to give them the information they need to make critical, authentic choices. It seems relevant in a marriage to know whether you're being cheated on. If he doesn't know his wife is cheating on him, he can't decide whether to stay in that marriage or not. I mean, after all, she could just call him up and say, I'm thinking of having sex with someone else. Are you okay with that? And if he says yes, then he's fully informed and maybe she can go ahead and do it. Maybe not, but at least, that would be one way to deal with this. So, maybe she's using her husband only as a means to an end. Some people also talked about maybe she's using the guy, assuming, she's using this guy just as a means to an end. She just wants to have sex with him. I guess we could ask ourselves, will you respect me in the morning? This kind of cliche. I'm not sure whether, you can really respect someone as an end in himself just while using him for a one-night stand. And of course, we could have an entire discussion about that. But certainly it's relevant to talking about Kant. If Julie is really only using this guy for sex, not respecting him, then that's morally wrong. I guess potentially she's not only using him as a means to an end. Maybe it is possible to really respect someone fully and have a one-night stand with him. That would really be the only way to have a one-night stand that would be morally acceptable. Of course, not in a marriage, but just any kind of one-night stand. It would only be right if you could really respect the person at the same time as having sex with them just for a one-night stand. Maybe she's using herself only as a means to an end. A few people went down that road. Kant uses this example of a drunk. He says it would be wrong for someone to go into a bar and allow himself to be beaten up just so he could get someone to buy him a drink, right? Using yourself, your body, as a means to an end. Kant says that's wrong. So I don't know. I mean, maybe all one-night stands are wrong if you're not respecting yourself while you're doing it. Again, I'm not saying that's what Kant would say, but it's something some people talked about, and I thought it was relevant. And I've got about a minute left, so I'm going to click through these last few slides here. Do Julie's intentions matter? They don't. Because remember, intentions only matter when we're talking about something that passes the categorical imperative. Good intentions allow us to differentiate morally neutral from morally good. But we already know cheating is wrong, and so it doesn't matter why Julie's doing it. There's no good intention that's going to make something immoral morally good. And then we could talk about what would be irrelevant. People avoided this for the most part, but I mean, a lot of this did creep in. It's really tough to not talk about consequences. What if Julie feels guilt, or what if she feels remorse, or what if there's a divorce, or what if she gets a disease, and all these what ifs. They're relevant to the extent that bad things are bad, but they're not relevant for Kant in terms of moral decision making. I didn't take off a lot of points if people did talk about consequences, but it's worth remembering that discussions of consequences are simply irrelevant for Kantian decision making. Feel free to send me email if you want some specific information on how I graded your paper, but I think this overview should help. Thanks a lot.